Democratic Senator Alex Padilla of California. Also with us, former senior spokesperson and advisor for the Harris campaign, Adrian Elrod, and host of the podcast On Brand with Donnie Deutsch. Donnie Deutsch is with us. And Joe, you have the first question for the senator.
You know, Senator, I usually spend time on this show telling people not to overreact to Supreme Court decisions, that you have to look deep into the body of the work to figure out what the impact is going to be. I will say this morning, I'm not doing that. This morning, even though it is a temporary lifting of an injunction, you actually have the Supreme Court of the United States saying that it is okay, regardless of the Fourth Amendment, to have people stopped for the crime of driving while being Hispanic, basically. They can be stopped. They can be questioned if they look Hispanic, if they have an accent, as members of the president's own family have, if they work in certain places. If you don't mind, I would love to read what Brett Kavanaugh wrote, because it's shocking how disconnected he is from the realities of what Americans have been facing for the past 6 months. Brett Kavanaugh wrote, "As for stops of those individuals who are legally in the country, the questioning in those circumstances is typically brief, and those individuals may promptly go free after making clear to immigration officers that they are U.S. citizens or otherwise legally in the United States." That is so removed from the reality of what happens when in some cases, when ICE officers stop someone who looks Hispanic, who may have an accent. Talk about, first of all, the dangers of this case, but also just how out of touch Justice Kavanaugh seems to be with the realities of being Hispanic in America today.
Right. So that may be what Justice Kavanaugh chooses to hear or chooses to believe, but we know that the reality is far different, to your point, Joe. And let me just sort of set the Supreme Court's decision yesterday in context. Half of the people who live in the Central District of California are Latino. We get that from the census numbers, which means that half the Californians who live in that area now fit the description of the Trump administration of who's suspect, who is fair game to be stopped, to be detained. And we've seen many cases of not just arrests, but ultimate deportations, often without due process. The Supreme Court is now further enabling that criteria. Not only is it morally wrong, it violates the Constitution. And for Latinos living in the Central District, elsewhere in California and around the country, the fear is palpable, the terror is palpable. This administration is unleashed, but the fight is not over.
Hey, Willie, as Justice Sotomayor wrote yesterday, this flies directly in the face of Supreme Court precedent from 1975, where officers could not stop people to question them because they thought they might be Mexican.
Yeah, and this wasn't a close call previously for the U.S. district judge who made this initial ruling that's now been blocked. So, Senator, given everything you just described and laid out so well, given the climate in your state, in your communities right now, what are you telling people? What are you telling Latinos in your state about how to move through their days, which is a terrible conversation to even have to consider?
Right, but and there is hope here because the fight is not over. But let me just underscore the fear and the terror that is real. When you have parents, including legal residents, including citizens, who are reluctant or even afraid to drop their kids off at school for fear of being detained, or pick up their kids from school, to hesitate to go to work. I mean, I see restaurants that are more than half empty, their typical clientele, because of the fear that's palpable on the streets of Los Angeles. That's not just a moral impact, it's also an economic impact for communities and for the country. And I mean, Joe, when priests are telling their parishioners, It's okay if you don't want to come to church and sit in the pews. You can watch the live stream. That just gives you an idea of the very palpable fear that people are living under. But look, this case is not over. This is a temporary lifting of the injunction. The underlying case continues, and we're going to continue to push legislatively here in Congress, litigation through the courts, and yes, through peaceful organizing on the streets to undo this racist, discriminatory policy.
Senator, certainly the fear that these people feel, so many people feel, most important. But you started to mention the economic impact, and that's where I wanted to go next. We're seeing a couple of really weak jobs reports a couple months in a row now, and we've talked to some analysts who say that part of the Trump immigration policies are doing this. They're going to have a negative impact, and soon. What are you seeing in your state?
Yeah. So in many ways, this is a very cruel irony, right? At the end of the first Trump administration, at the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, the first Trump administration deemed workers in so many key industries as essential to the economy, essential to our nation's security. Workers in hospitality, in agriculture, in meat processing, transportation, construction, et cetera. And now all those workers seem to be the primary targets of Trump's indiscriminate immigration enforcement actions. And so, yes, it's going to take an economic toll. It's already taken a toll in California. As I said, people are afraid to go to work. People are afraid to go shopping. But beyond that, let's look at the political dynamics of what's going on. Whether it's the Epstein files, whether it's a crumbling economy, Trump is once again trying to distract, trying to change the news cycle, trying to change the narrative. When Donald Trump is down in the polls, his go-to is demonizing immigrants. He's done it in Los Angeles, and he's threatened to do it in Chicago and elsewhere in cities that have Democratic leadership across the country.
All right. Thank you so much. Democratic Senator Alex Padilla of California. So great that you're here to talk about this important ruling. And please let your constituents know we're thinking about them. We're praying for them, and we'll keep speaking out for them. And we're greatly appreciative of you being here this morning.
Thank you. Thank you very much.